Hello, welcome back to the Doctor Kirstin Show. I'm your host, Dr. Kirstin Lauritsen. And today, if you notice that you tend to crave sugar, caffeine, whether in the form of coffee or energy drinks, if you tend to crave salt, like potato chips, if you have fatigue, if you're tired all the time, like potentially you could sleep for 5 days straight. Uh, Also, if you feel not just like tired, but like it's like a bone deep exhaustion, like really tired. The whole body almost feels like sluggish and slow. You feel like you could just sit on the couch for hours. If you feel low mood, maybe even have depression or just sort of feel that like sadness, that depressed feeling, that state, or anxious. If you ever get dizzy or feel faint, or if you have allergies, if you have digestive issues like constipation or bloating, or just feeling like food doesn't really get digested very well, all sorts of things, as well as if you get sick and you get sick often and it just takes you a long time to get better. These are all signs and symptoms of a potential adrenal issue. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today is supporting your adrenals and the your body's ability to cope with stress. And please keep in mind that this is more about balance, systemic balance. This isn't necessarily about diagnosing anything. This isn't necessarily about treating anything specific, but it's really about identifying where there may be a need for more support and then how we can get your body that support. So if you're ready to dive in, here we go. So the adrenals and stress are really important. There are some huge misconceptions that we're going to address today that I even think that sometimes practitioners don't always get right. So we're going to really discuss what that means and what your like autonomic nervous system is, and we're going to go into the different aspects of that, and then what you might notice and how you might feel if you are in some of those states. So, first things first, we discussed sort of some of the things that you might be feeling, right? Is like craving caffeine, sugar, salts. These are some pretty solid signs that you may be not only under some stress, but that your like you're really starting to see it show up in your food and nutrition and choices, right, being made throughout the day. So that's one thing that's really, really common. The other thing about the adrenals as well is that it's also really important to note that it is a part of an axis. So, this axis is called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis. And essentially, what's happening is it's how your brain is communicating to your body what to do in terms of stress, when it's there, when it's not, how to replenish, how to send resources, what to do in those places. Like, do we release more cortisol? Do we not? There's a whole lot of like hormones and things that are all happening. There's also a lot of mineral things that are happening there as well, between like your sodium and potassium pumps and all of those things that are also interacting and a part of this system doing its job well. And when we also want to talk about the adrenals, we also need to talk, and we're talking about stress. Before we really dig into what to do about adrenals and stress, we need to know what our autonomic nervous system is doing. You will know this as the terms of fight or flight, so your sympathetic nervous system, or rest and digest, which is your parasympathetic nervous system. However, your parasympathetic nervous system has two factors in it, and this is going more into the like polyvagal theory. This is where your parasympathetic nervous system gets chunked into two parts. So you have the sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight or flight. That's where you will experience more like rage and anger, irritation, frustration, panic, fear, anxiety, worry, and concern. So, really identifying whatever it is that's going on in your life right now. where are those things coming from? Like if you are frustrated, if you're angry, if you have a lot of anxiety or worry, your brain is applying meaning to it. So it's identifying what are the stories that are behind what's happening right now that are keeping you in that fight or flight state. And then within the parasympathetic nervous system, there's two parts. So if we're sticking on the part of like, okay, fight or flight or freeze, freeze is also a part of the parasympathetic nervous system, but it is the life-threatening dorsal vagal response. So this is where your your nervous system has gone so far past the sympathetic nervous system survival mode that is like it's literally in survival, like the deeper levels of survival mode where there's shutdown. So this is where we start to see more of like collapse, we start to see more immobility, a conservation of energy. This is where also you'll start to see people like lose your period. You've gone past the like losing libido, but like you're in the like I cannot do this anymore stage. So this is where dissociation happens. This is where numbness happens, depression. It's like very like helpless, like shame, shut down, hopelessness, preparation for, death almost, feeling trapped. Like this is the part of the nervous system where when people get to that point, like things are really dire, right? And it's also where your nervous system has gone so far past being able to cope with stress that like we've lost resources. Like at a cellular level, the body can no longer has the resources or the capacity to manage that stress anymore. So when you're there, we have to start working our way back, right? And so that's a side of the parasympathetic nervous system that doesn't really get discussed enough, but I do see this so often with women and moms because there's so many different beliefs and patternings and programmings behind being a good mom and the sacrifice of self and because of that, and I know some people who've done a lot of work around it, and still you could be getting caught up in this stage or in this phase because of different beliefs and different systems and stuff that we learn. Especially too if you've been at this for a really, really long time, or you've been through not just an acute phase of stress, but a really long time of chronic stress. All of these things can be really hard on the body. And then over time, if you've been in like dealing with like a health condition for a really long time, like a chronic health condition or autoimmune disease or any of those things, these when you've been in those states for a really long time, this is where, I will often see clients coming in because it's just getting like worse and worse and worse because the body's just having a really hard time. So one of our goals is to get to a parasympathetic state that is, we call it ventral vagal with the polyvagal theory, but it's essentially where your body and your brain and your mind feel safe. This is where your nervous system, this is why you see on like the internet that everybody's talking about your nervous system feeling safe. It's not that hard to be in that state for a long period of time once you've done enough of the deeper work that really addresses a lot of the reasons that pull you out of that place. You are meant to get into fight or flight. Like you are meant to get into that place, but you also need to have the tools that help you get back out of it back into the ventral vagal, like a safe place, right? And we are meant to be spending a decent amount of our time in that space. This is where you start feeling more energy. This is where you start feeling more health and vitality. This is where your immune response is really good. You have a lot of rest and recuperation, and it's easy to do it. There's balance, right, between the two, between working hard and doing what you got to do, and then also being able to flow back into that rest and digest state. This is where there's a lot more curiosity, a lot more openness. So what ends up happening is you see a lot more resources, you see a lot more opportunities and possibilities. We don't have like a one space focused approach on like this is the solution that is going to fix the problem, which usually is very limiting. We in the ventral vagal state, or when in this part of your parasympathetic nervous system, it's a lot more wide, it's a lot more open, and there's so much more possibilities. And this is also usually where people are like, oh, I kept trying to make it happen this way, but actually there's all of these other ways that I could make this happen too. There's calmness, there's connection, there's groundedness and feeling settled and compassionate towards yourself and others. feeling mindful and in the present. So when I talk to moms about creating that like mindfulness, that presence, that openness, groundedness, connection, what I'm essentially teaching you is like how to get your nervous system into a space where you feel connected and safe and oriented to your environment, which means you're going to be more responsive, which means you're going to be able to hold a lot better space for your kids when they're having their big emotions. But I'm not just giving you tools that are going to help you as a parent. I'm also giving you tools that are going to help you. Because when you are able to be in that space for a longer period of time, that's where that energy and that vitality and that life starts to come back. It means we're no longer in a depleted state that's one where we're just feeling like we're barely getting by, right? In that like freeze, fight or flight state. Like it's switched from I can to I can't. Like I literally cannot do this anymore. Capability. I'm not capable. I'm not worthy. I can't do this. And keep in mind that, like so many of these stories, you've been carrying for a long time. So that's why then when they pop up in motherhood, not only do you have the physical depletion, but also now and if any other like traumas or big stressors have happened, not only do you now have that, but then also now you've been through that period for a long period of time. It's just really zapped up a lot of resources. So we've got to rebuild from not just the mental emotional piece of letting go a lot of those stories, but also from the physical point of getting you the resources so that your body can like literally do what it needs to do so you can have energy, right? And feel better. But I think one of the reasons why people feel like it's so hard to get into that safety ventral vagal place is because there can be so many mental, emotional patterns and learned stuff that you've carried from when you were a kid. Hidden stressors is what I call them, that sometimes we're not even aware of fully that that's what they are, but they're playing out. And so it pulls you out of that like safety ventral vagal place. It pulls you out of that part of your parasympathetic nervous system that is in that really like resting, recuperating, vitality place. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible to be there. And it doesn't mean that it's impossible to have a healthy balance between like the fight or flight and the ventral vagal place, right? That parasympathetic nervous system that is the healthier, I hesitate to say that, but like it's the part of your nervous system where you are going to feel healthy. Is you'll still be yeah, I think that's probably the best place to leave that. That is also where like you're going to be acting from a place that will help to heal any sort of like inflammation that has popped up because you were in fight or flight. You know, that there's a okay response that happens there. Like when you work out, your sympathetic nervous system is supposed to kick in. It's supposed to do that. So you see the rise in cortisol, you see the rise in blood pressure and heart rate and all of those things and fuel availability. Like all of those things are supposed to be happening. But then you also need to come out of it and come back into that like ventral vagal, like safe parasympathetic state. But what happens is that people live in that fight or flight state almost 100% of the time. And so no wonder it's hard to digest food, right? And no wonder it's hard to be present for your kids. And no wonder it's hard to like feel like you are resilient and that you have your health, and all of those things. Like it's really hard to feel that way when you're in a part of your nervous system that's like, hey, we're in danger, we're in threat mode. And then if you live there for long enough, like then it's not just a threat, it's not just danger, but like now there's like a significant problem that's really threatening our well-being. So, one of the really common patterns that I see here is that people often get dismissed by their practitioners because you may not be able to find why you don't feel well on a lab, especially like a CBC. So, your typical labs that you get from your doctor, right? Your metabolic panels. Even people will get thyroid panels and hormone panels, and they'll be looking for all of these things, but they can't find why they don't feel well. And like on a complete blood count, there's actually quite a bit that we can do from a functional level as far as looking at just tighter normal within normal ranges. Like we can, from a functional standpoint, that's what we do is I have much tighter and much stricter levels that ranges that I look at when I'm reading my clients' labs because that's actually where, in my opinion, a lot of things get missed. And there's a lot of people who are like low in B vitamins and can even show that you're not methylating B vitamins very well. Like it's a very also another thing that's very popular right now is like your MTHFR genes and your COMT and like all of these things that are like methylation is a very common thing in like the functional world, and people are asking about it a lot. But essentially, like we can see on your labs when you might be having some issues with that. And then if you're taking any supplements that are kind of like low quality B vitamins and if your diet also is full of a lot of foods that are like they've added in a lot of like folic acid, they've added in a lot of these nutrients back in that don't have the methylation donors that you would when they like were in their original form, like you get from like fruits and vegetables and things like that. That's where we can start to see additional stress on the body because it needs to find those things in order to then do something about the B vitamins and other things that you're putting into your body. So again, you're just using up more resources, and if it doesn't have them, then those things tend to just float around in the body, and then there's been some studies that have suggested that that can also be problematic. So just from your standard labs alone, we can really see where there might be some imbalances that will give us more insight into what's going on inside of your body. We know if we see oxidative stress, if we see higher inflammation levels, if we see that also on some of those panels as well, we can address and look at and see if there's any sort of like viruses or uh, digestive imbalances. So, looking more at like on the metabolic panel, depending on what is shown there, we can actually gain a lot of insight into what's going on in the GI tract just from looking at the neutrophils and lymphocytes and the eosinophils and basophils. Like straight up, what is already on the labs that you already probably have, we can gain a lot of information from there, which then tells us a lot more about where to start looking. Now, some people start getting a little bit wonky about that because they're like, well, how do you know? Well, the thing is that when you do this for long enough with enough people, you not only see the labs, and then when you pull another GI panel that then confirms exactly what you just said, like, you know, the clinical standpoint, like the evidence just starts stacking up. So that's one way that we can already start seeing like, okay, do we have some deficiencies that are showing us that your body is already depleted, right? That it is struggling to get enough resources in order to have the energy, to have the health to do its process as well. We can also then look a little bit deeper too, right? We can do things like a hair tissue mineral analysis that really help us identify where your body's patterns are potentially holding back your cells from getting the resources that they need in order to do their job well. And that is like the key factor, right? Is like that's why we eat the foods we do. That's why we do and take the supplements and all of the things that we do is because our cells are the things that help us function, right? They are the broken down like enough to like as long as our cells are have the resources to do their jobs and they're not getting bogged down with oxidative stress and toxins and things like that, like then they're going to function well in most cases, right? So that's the point. And that's how you start feeling better is we got to look at it from that perspective. But then what happens too, I mean, there's other things that we can look at too from a functional lab standpoint is like we can look at so we talked about like the mineral levels and depletion. The thing to keep in mind there is that, especially when we're talking about like postnatal depletion, not only are we looking at minerals from like maybe you're not getting enough from your food, or maybe they're being, used up from pregnancy and then in breastfeeding and then anything else. But then on top of that, different imbalances in different minerals can also counteract against each other as well. So you could be taking magnesium, but if you're in a really high state of stress, then that magnesium could be getting excreted. It could be being used up a lot, but then under high stress, the body will tend to dump it. So you might be taking magnesium thinking like this should be making me feel better, but in reality, like it's not because the stressor itself hasn't been addressed yet, right? And there are other minerals that all act and can counterbalance each other as well. So it's super important to be and looking at like where some of these imbalances might be coming from, where they might be like you could be doing all of the things right, but they're actually preventing each other from like actually being absorbed and doing their job. And then there's other things that can happen, like if we have calcium that's like kind of creating like a protective cell around the cell itself, then it can make it really hard for like thyroid. Like you might be doing all of the things to like the thyroid may be doing its job well, but if the thyroid hormone can't get into the cells, like then we're going to have a problem, right? So we can see all of this on labs. And then in addition to that, if you look at like a Dutch hormone panel, there's so much information you can get there from the hormone perspective that at least allows you to see like, are we burned out? Are we seeing imbalances in different hormones? Is the liver actually being able to handle? Does it have enough resources? Does it have enough antioxidants in order to detoxify the stuff that's coming into the body? All of these things we can see on a lab, and that's not even talking about a GI panel or looking at a mineral like I love the Genova Diagnostics NutriVal, which shows us vitamins, minerals, omega status, and how your mitochondria are functioning. Like there's so much that we can learn just from these labs. But what I'm saying here is not that we have to pull all of the labs. It's how all of the pieces are going together. Because here's the thing. This is why so many practitioners feel like it's so hard to help people get into and stay in a parasympathetic state that is that like safety state and that nervous system that's like, oh, like we can actually tackle and handle this stuff right now because we've got resources. The reason why people feel like it's so hard to get there and stay there is because they aren't actually addressing the emotional and mental load that is on top of everything else. So, two things, right? So, you could be doing all of the things, you could be taking all of the supplements, and you could be eating all the right foods and all of that. But if the GI tract is so imbalanced that you can't even absorb the stuff that you're taking, it's just getting all passed through your gut. You're not actually absorbing the majority of the stuff that's happening there, right? So, that would potentially need to be addressed. And any sort of like intestinal permeability or inflammation or anything else that's coming from the gut. But on the flip side, if the GI tract also is doing that well, but you aren't actually addressing the mental and emotional load that is on top of that body. So, why are you stressed? What is the meaning that you are making out of everything that's happening? What are you making it mean to you or about you that you like, and you're not consciously doing it. It's your subconscious mind is filtering everything that's happening and it's creating meaning out of everything that's happening. It's based on what we call your filing cabinet, right? You have all of these different beliefs and learned things from your childhood in those files, and your brain at every single moment is taking in information and it's making it mean something. And it's telling you, oh, this reconfirms what this file says. And so therefore, here's what we do about it. Here's how we act. Here's what we think. Here's the emotions that we have that are associated with this. So when you actually address the mental and emotional baggage, right? Those things that people are carrying that you feel. Remember, right? Like when I was talking about the life threat phase, right? That freeze response, dissociation, numbness, depression, helplessness, shame, shutdown, hopelessness. Dissociation and numbness means that you've gone so far past the feeling point that you've created beliefs that are telling you I'm not going to feel this stuff anymore because it's too painful to feel it. The only way through that is to heal. And it's not just healing at the physical level. Like you can put all the stuff in you want into the body to try and help, but if you don't actually address why those patterns are there, that is a huge stressor on your system that will absolutely make it hard to be in that safer parasympathetic nervous system place for very long. So you've got to heal. And it's not just at the physical level, but it's actually at the mental and emotional levels. And also, I will say this isn't just at the conscious level of being aware of where those things came from. It's actually allowing for the subconscious mind and the body to release them from the body, that they are no longer being stored there, and that you have learned something new so that your brain can start gaining other experiences that confirm the new belief, the new learning. Because the thing is, I will say this over and over and over again, is that if at one point in time in your life you learned the thing from the things that happened in your life between 0 and 8 years old, you learned all of it, which means that now as an adult, you can relearn it. You can learn something new. That's the best part. It's not hopeless, that you can learn something new. How long it's going to take you, I don't know. Everybody's journey is different. And it is a journey, right? It's not just like a linear point from start to finish. It is a journey. And I catch people in all stages and phases of that journey. But it is something that you can learn. And I will tell you this over and over and over again. The best thing that I get to hear when I work with clients is when they actually release these things. One of the things that is the most common thing that they say is like, oh my gosh, I feel so much lighter. And the thing to note about that is that when you feel so much lighter, that is your body essentially being like, oh, like all of this stuff that we were using in the background, that were like all of these tabs of a computer open, taking up all of this memory and all of this space. Like we were literally using so much energy to keep those programs going. I can just let all of that's gone. So now what does the body get to do? Remember when we were talking about those depleted states of being like the body doesn't have enough resources? Oh, like imagine all of those resources that were generating and keeping up all of those stories now get to go somewhere else. They now get to go somewhere else. They get to go and be used for other things. So when you now are in a safe ventral vagal state where your parasympathetic nervous system is like, oh, I can breathe. I'm safe here. Now, when you're resting and recuperating, and you're not also generating stories of like how guilty you feel because you're resting and how you should be doing more and how like everything's going to go to heck in a handbasket because you're not doing all of the things and like everything's going to fall apart. When those stories aren't running anymore, that rest and recuperation time becomes so much more powerful and so much more helpful for your body. Which also means too, like sometimes people feel worse before they feel better there because your body is now like, oh, like I'm getting to rest, but you're doing it for a different reason now. So now it's just time to let your body finish healing. But when you're not running those stories in the background anymore, like I'm smiling from ear to ear right now if you're not watching on YouTube, but like when those stories aren't running in the background, like your body gets to like put all of those resources and that rest towards what it actually needs to do with it. And while it might take a little bit longer for your body to rest at the beginning, over time, when you're actually able to balance that rest and like work and productivity and like that time, when you're able to balance that a lot better, it doesn't take as long. Let me give you an example of this because this is actually really something that popped up even yesterday. So, over the past couple of days, I was like kind of feeling I've been getting up a lot earlier, and usually I only drink like maybe a couple of cups of coffee, but I noticed I was like practically finishing a whole pot like unintentionally, and I was just noticing that I was just drinking a lot of caffeine, and I was just kind of, and then all of a sudden the sugar and the salt, like those cravings were starting to pop up, and I was like, I can't rest right now, like I've got to do the stuff, I gotta push, I gotta push, I gotta push. like all, I'm very aware of these patterns, right? And then so I didn't necessarily listen over the weekend. And I was just getting this sign of like, hey, you need to take some time, you need to take some time. And then finally yesterday, I was like trying to do this podcast. I was trying to do some other things. And I just realized I was like, I can't. It's like my body is done. So you know what I like in a sense it almost forced me to take the time. So I stopped. I went and I just watched TV while my daughter was asleep taking a nap, and I just chilled out. And my husband came in and he was like, "Hey, what you doing?" And I was like, "I am just taking some time because I'm tired." I didn't feel any guilt. I didn't feel lazy. I was like, I literally tried to do some stuff and I realized it's just going to be way too hard to do it. And it's not going to take me that long if I just wait and like recuperate. So I took the time. And then today, everything's like back on schedule, right? Everything's great. I feel great. In the past, though, the reason why I share this is that in the past, I wouldn't have even listened to that. So I would have kept pushing and I would have kept going until a point where either I had to rest for an entire week or an entire month, or I would get sick. And even to the point that this is actually the pattern that caused my endometriosis and migraines and my chronic health symptoms. Because I would push so hard and I wouldn't listen and I was so dissociated and so numb that I didn't that I just would not listen. Burnout constantly, constant patterns. Migraines, a literal like sign that I've been pushing so hard and not resting that by the time that we finally push through and get through the most stressful period, migraine kicks on as soon as cortisol drops. You would see this as like getting done with finals and then immediately getting a migraine. It's a sign, right? That like the body is really over capacity and it's not able to cope with that stress. Like it's just running off of cortisol. So instead now, like sometimes I catch it even sooner than that, right? Where it's not forcing me to stop, but life is life, right? So, and I'm doing this all by the way with kids, right? With a kiddo. It all gets to be okay, right? Part of it is just releasing a lot of the stories we have about how everything needs to look and how everything needs to be and how we need to show up and what a good mom is and all of those things. It's just releasing the stories that we have behind all of those. But this doesn't just fall under motherhood, right? It falls like in the health space. Like this is really where the work is because chronic health conditions, I'm speaking to PCOS, endometriosis, autoimmune diseases of all kinds, mystery symptoms, mystery diseases that we don't even have names for. They are all cancer, right? All of these things are where your body is basically forcing you to stop. Like your body at this point is saying, no, no more. We're done. So, when it comes to looking at the adrenals and this conversation around the adrenals, this is the bigger, deeper conversation that needs to happen. And it is the transformative work that needs to happen. It's not just about taking an adrenal supplement and being like, see ya. Hope you feel better in a couple of weeks. This is where we're starting to look at all of those underlying factors underneath. Because if you really want to help out your adrenals and you really want to heal the body, we need to reduce as many stressors as possible. So this isn't just from the perspective of like jobs or other things. I will say this too. before I get into the other pieces. But even inside of motherhood, the reason why I speak so much to those patterns and programming and conditioning is because there are there are so many stories around it. Yeah, is motherhood hard? Yes. And one of the reasons why it feels and can be so hard is because we are running so many programs of what everybody has said it should be like, what we should be doing, how we should be, and they don't none of that has anything to do with how you are meant to be a mom, like who you are, what you want and need to do. Even going as deep as, do you even know what you want? That's the reason why I created the Worthy Workshop, is because like so many women and so many moms, when you ask them like, what do you want? They don't even know what that is. They can't even tell you what it is that they want or need. So all of this is so important because we can't you can't really get rid of your kids, but like if right, like that's so many people are like, oh, if I could just get a day off, right? If I could just get a weekend off, if I could just get some time away, like they want to escape. So their body's in freeze, right? Their nervous system is like, I cannot do this anymore. So what needs to happen is so much healing at the deeper levels so that your nervous system can be in a safer parasympathetic, like ventral vagal state where you can find connection and mindfulness and presence. It's not just about managing the mindful, like managing the mind and giving you all of these mindfulness tools. It's actually about teaching your body how to be in that parasympathetic state that is where you know you are safe so that you can plug in, so that you can connect, so you can be grounded, so you can be in the present. That's when motherhood is no longer overwhelming and and just a constant source of burnout and unfulfillment and having no purpose. And like your kids are just going to drive you up the wall crazy and you're anxious all the time and worried and all of this stuff, right? You're yelling at your kids and feeling rage and anger and panic and fear all at the same time and frustration, right? Like that is those are so much of that is where our own triggers and our own healing hasn't happened yet. I say that because so many people will be like, well, I'm a mom, so obviously, like, this is how it's going to be. And I am telling you that that is not the end, that there is so much more available, and that motherhood doesn't have to be this self-sacrifice that takes down your health. And I don't have the exact statistic for this, but autoimmune disease is so freaking high in women, especially after pregnancy. Why do you think that is? It's because of everything that we've just talked about. It's not just the physical depletion. Autoimmune disease is an attack on self. And to be a good mom in the way society has stated motherhood needs to be, is it means that we need to be selfless, which literally translates to abandoning self. We have been taught that being a good mom means full sacrifice of self. And then we wonder why the immune system is starting to attack the self. This is why it's not just about the physical body and the supplements and everything that you're doing there. This is why when we see the adrenals and they've been pumping out cortisol and they've been doing all of this stuff and your nervous system has been in not just fight or flight, but maybe all the way into that freeze response of collapse and immobility, like that is where depletion, it's not just about giving your body the resources. It's about really identifying the deeper underlying factors that are creating the crash and creating the burnout. Because we can give you resources all day long, but if that pattern is going to keep repeating itself over and over and over again, then we never changed the identity pieces at like the bottom identity level. The pattern just keeps repeating itself over and over, right? So this is oftentimes why we see postnatal depletion and the effects of it not just show up in the year postpartum, but up to 10, 15 years later or longer. Because the deeper things, the deeper patterning, the deeper programming, the deeper conditioning, the emotions, the beliefs, the thoughts were never addressed. But this doesn't just happen in motherhood. This happens in any area. So I think the best way to really wrap this up is realizing that when we're looking at treatment plans and when we're looking at addressing these pieces, it's not just about, again, the physical body, but it's actually about returning trust back to you. It's not just about outsourcing everything to your practitioners, but it's actually being able to identify what you specifically need. And that can be a really big source of frustration because oftentimes it feels like we're blind to those things. The reality is, though, is that ultimately, when we're looking to heal, when we're looking to um, be in that present, in that connected place and in that state, it's not just about being present and connected for, in our life and for our kids and all of that. It's actually about doing that for ourselves. And ultimately, we need to restore that trust back to you and to yourself, and that you can do it, right? And that you are capable and that you are worthy and that you are deserving of having the health and the life and the vitality that you want. That's where we get underneath all of the stories. That's where we start helping the body and the mind and the emotions and the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis, like all of those things, your adrenals. That's where we really help the body be able to like reduce stress instead of just like telling you to take a supplement, right? We also see this too, like, we can see it on neurotransmitter panels. We can see, if serotonin, norepinephrine, and epinephrine are really low. I'm going to just digress into this really quickly because it just came to mind. But like, if those are really low, it's just a sign that like the body has had a really, really hard time coping with stress and it's like lost its capacity, right? It's no longer able to cope with the stressors that are on it. So there's a lot of different ways that we can see we can get a look on what's happening in the body and how your body is responding. If you also have a Dutch panel again and like the cortisone metabolites are low, it's burnout. Directly correlated to burnout. So if you need a lab to show you that you do need to rest and that you do need to recuperate, and you need to have that physical evidence that that's what you need to do, then like we can show you that on panels. Like we can pull them right now, right? We can find it. Sometimes people need that. And I want to make sure that you know that like if you have not had anything like explain why you feel the way you do, there are so many ways to look at why that's happening, and sometimes we just need to think a little bit more outside of the box. And what can happen is when we are feeling like we don't know what's going on, we don't know why we feel the way we do, and nobody can give us answers for that. What ends up oftentimes happening is not just did we like dissociate and, lose hopelessness or lose hope and stop, feeling feelings, we start numbing, we also start ignoring. We start ignoring ourselves. We start ignoring our symptoms. We start ignoring how we're feeling. So we start pushing through and keeping going. And there's a reason why those patterns create the patterns that they do, the diseases and the chronic health stuff that they do. So maybe you have postpartum anxiety, maybe you have postpartum depression, maybe you have depletion, maybe you're just feeling very fatigued and exhausted, maybe your hormones are all out of balance and so you're looking for hormone balance and looking for, hormone replacement therapy, or maybe you're just dealing with a lot of the symptoms like the allergies, the immune system stuff, and maybe you also have autoimmune disease, or it might be on the horizon and you're just trying to figure out what the heck is going on with you. Maybe you have a whole lot of mystery symptoms, right? And mystery conditions and diseases that nobody can really tell you what's going on there. If that's you, Um, the best place to start is identifying, yes, what's going on in the physical body. So getting some further testing that's going to give you some more answers, but also starting that journey of what I call the transformational journey of like, okay, what is happening in the mental, emotional, and energetic spaces that is holding me back from everything that I'm doing, like from those things actually working? Where do I not believe that what I'm doing is going to help me? Where do I not believe that I am worthy or capable of actually having the results that I want? And then when we are, creating that foundation of health, of addressing the stress and addressing diet and blood sugar, right? When we're making sure that you're, not adding in more sugar into your body so it's releasing more cortisol, right? And then just having it, all be there. When we're addressing the mindset, when we're addressing sleep, when we're addressing digestion and elimination and all of those other pieces that are so critical for, building that foundation of health, we're addressing it from a full perspective, right? We're not piecing it all together with different puzzle pieces from different puzzles, but we're actually we're creating the puzzle from pieces that actually belong to that puzzle. That's how we get from that burned out, constantly like that crash and burn, feeling great, putting that energy back into other people and other programs and other productivity places, and then burning out again, right? This is how we really get from there to that really well-nourished and thriving state that is entirely possible. Not only is it possible, but it is absolutely possible inside of motherhood. When you feel like you are at your best, that's when there's so much more opportunity, right? There's so much more opportunity for you to be living your life when you're in that well-nourished and thriving state. And if you're still wondering, like, yeah, but I've like tried a lot of things. I've had this conversation a lot this week. And the one thing that has been really, really common that's come up is having a 1 foot in, 1 foot out mindset. That you're trying a lot of things. You're trying to do a lot of things, which implies that you don't necessarily entirely believe that they're actually going to work at the deepest level. You might be like, yeah, but like, I do believe it. I do feel like it. But there are other reasons why it might not be working. So maybe there's some additional digging that needs to happen. But when you tune in, do you get that sense of like, oh, yeah, I've definitely been if you have that sense of like, oh, yeah, I've been 1 foot in, 1 foot out, what needs to shift so that you can be both feet in? What needs to shift so you have all of the support, all of it, all of the pieces put together? And this could be with one person or it could be with a team. Just making sure that all of those pieces are addressed. This is how we actually leave not just health for ourselves, but we leave a generation of we create legacies of health. Because when we heal at the root, foundational, deepest level, it also allows that to come through for our kids when our nervous systems are in a place of safety most of the time, like they are meant to be. You then are able to hold a lot more space for your kids and for their stuff as well. And when you're able to heal your stuff, it means then the patterns that are playing out for you as health things, like we're not passing those necessarily down to our kids as well. And again, even if your kids are older, teenagers, college age, whatever, this work is never too late. Never too late. Because once you're able to fix like when you heal your stuff, you can then be a part of helping your kids be able to do that too, even if they're older, right? It's all possible. So if this was helpful, I would love for you to come on over to Instagram. Let me know. Tell me what landed. Tell me what was like a huge breakthrough moment. I would love to know what you found exciting or what sort of shifted your perspective. And I also have available right now, I have the Worthy Workshop, which is a workshop where it will help you. It's 90 minutes and it is a master class that will help you get to the root and shift and change the limiting belief around I can't or I'm not worthy. These are the two beliefs at the root of so many reasons that hold people back from actually creating the results and the health that they want. Anything in your life that you feel stuck around, believing that you deserve it and that you're worthy of it and that you are capable. And when those two things are there, then when you start chipping away at the other things, when you start, I also wanted to say too, sometimes what needs to happen is we need to get your body some more resources so that you just even have the energy to look at the other things. So another option is to do something like I find a very, very good starting place is a hair tissue mineral analysis that essentially allows you to look at where can we get you some more resources like we talked about in this episode already and at least get you starting to feel better, and then it will make it a lot easier to start addressing some of those other pieces because sometimes if you're just so burned out and just so in that like exhausted state, it can be really hard to address and get that nervous system into a more like balanced state if you're so depleted. Right. So there's an order of operations that tends to come there, and it sort of just depends on where you're at. So for some people, a really good entry point, right, would be to like, I know I need to actually look at the belief part of it because I'm doing a lot of things and they're not working. Or it might be, hey, we actually really do need to support the physical body and we need to address those pieces first. And then we can start layering on the mental, emotional pieces that are going to really move the needle a lot faster from there. So those are some really good, really, really good places to start. And if you're somebody who's just at that level that's like, all right, I'm tired of like doing all of these pieces and trying to piece stuff together. And I just really want that, like, I know this is going to take a longer kind of chunk of time, but like I am ready to actually do those steps and take those steps that allows me to like my own roadmap, but having support through the whole way that addresses the physical, mental, emotional, and energetic bodies. That is an opportunity where the deep dive would be a really good fit. So if that is you and you're looking for something like that, that is a transformational container that is, again, addressing the deepest levels of all of those, building the foundations of health, but not just from the physical body standpoint, but also from the mental and emotional well-being as well. The deep dive and that 12-month container, that 1 year container is really where those people who are looking for that really thrive. So if that is what you're looking for, then I just suggest coming on over to Instagram, send me a DM. The link is in the show notes, and we can see if you would be a good fit for that. All right. I'm so glad you were here. If you listened to the whole thing, I really hope that this was helpful, and I will see you for the next episode. All right. Take care.